The greatest city of the elves was not destroyed by an army. It was undone by a single whisper in the dark. Its fall was the final, mortal blow to the Noldor in the First Age, a tragedy so profound it extinguished the last great beacon of hope against a seemingly infinite night. This was the story of Gondolin, the hidden city. Its destruction was a cataclysm on a scale that makes the siege of Minas Tirith seem but a border skirmish, for its enemy was not a mere Dark Lord, but the primeval source of all evil in the world, and he would unleash the full might of his hell-forged legions to see it erased. For over 400 years, Gondolin was more myth than reality, a city of white stone and silver fountains, built in secret by King Turgon, under the divine guidance of Ulmo, the Lord of Waters. It was a perfect recreation of the elven city of Tirith, in the blessed realm of Valinor, a memory of paradise made manifest in a world besieged by shadow. It lay upon the plain of Tumlodin, shielded from all sight by the Akoraeth, the encircling mountains. This was a flawless natural fortress, a geological prison for any who would dare assail it, and a sanctuary for those within. Only one path existed into this hidden valley, a secret tunnel carved beneath the mountains, its passage guarded by 7 successive gates, each manned by a tireless watch. For centuries, no spy of Morgoth had ever found it. No army could ever approach it. Gondolin was inviolate. It was safe. Within its walls, the Noldor thrived. They were the High Elves who had seen the light of the 2 trees of Valinor, and their artistry was unparalleled. They forged weapons of legendary power and crafted jewels of breathtaking beauty. In the King's Square grew Glingol and Belthil, 2 trees of gold and silver fashioned in the image of the lost trees of light, their magical glow bathing the city in a perpetual, gentle luminescence. Here, the sorrow of exile was held at bay by peace and prosperity. Turgon ruled with wisdom, believing his seclusion was the ultimate strategy. By remaining hidden, by taking no part in the endless wars of Beleriand, he could preserve a remnant of his people, a final archive of elven lore and light to outlast the darkness. He had become a king of isolation, forbidding any from leaving, lest the secret of the way in be revealed. For generations this law held. Gondolin became a city of memory, content in its own perfection, while outside its mountain walls the world burned. One by one, the other elven kingdoms fell. Nargothrond was sacked by a dragon. Doriath was ruined by infighting. Hithlum was enslaved. The great union of elves and men had been shattered in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, a battle Turgon himself had arrived too late to win, retreating back to his secret fastness and sealing the way behind him forever. Gondolin was now the last, the final repository of Noldoran hope, a city of 100,000 souls, an army that had never known defeat, and a king who believed his walls were absolute. But even in this paradise, a shadow was growing, a poison born of unrequited love and bitter envy, waiting for the perfect moment to curdle hope into despair. For how can you guard a city against a traitor who already walks its halls? The shadow's name was Maeglin. He was the king's own nephew, son of Turgon's sister, Eärendil. His story was one of tragedy from the beginning. His father was Eärendil, the Dark Elf, a master smith of reclusive and possessive character, who had ensnared Eärendil and kept her in his shadowed forest. Maeglin was born and raised in twilight, never seeing the full light of the sun, and he inherited his father's smithcraft, his ambition, and his dark moods. But he also inherited the Noldoran fire of his mother, and a yearning for the grand city of his uncle, of which she told him stories. Eventually, they escaped to Gondolin, but Ecthelion pursued them. When brought before Turgon, the proud Dark Elf refused to remain, and in his rage he attempted to kill his own son with a poisoned javelin. Eärendil leaped in front of Maeglin, taking the dart for him. She died from its venom, and for his crime, Turgon had Ecthelion cast from the city walls to his death. Before he fell, Ecthelion cursed Maeglin, proclaiming that his son would meet the very same end. Despite this horrific arrival, Maeglin was welcomed. He was Prince of the Blood, and his skill as a smith and a miner was beyond any in the city. He discovered rich lodes of ore in the mountains, and from them he forged weapons of incredible strength and hardness, bolstering Gondolin's already formidable armories. He was held in high esteem, second only to the king himself. He became the lord of the House of the Mole, one of the 12 noble houses of the city. He had power, respect, and influence. But he did not have the one thing he truly desired. He loved his first cousin, Idril. In the elder days, such a kinship was not a barrier to marriage among the elves, but in Gondolin, the law forbade it. Yet it was not the law that truly stood in his way. It was Idril herself. She saw the darkness in him, the shadow of his father, the possessive fire in his eyes. She recoiled from it, and her heart gave him no welcome. His love festered, turning from adoration into a grim, silent obsession. His bitterness found a target when a mortal man, Tuor, arrived in the city. He came as a messenger from the sea god Ulmo himself, bearing a warning that the doom of the Noldor was approaching, and that Turgon must abandon his city and flee to the sea. Turgon, proud and confident in the strength of his creation, rejected the warning, but he welcomed Tuor, who grew mighty and beloved among the people, and he won the heart of Idril. The marriage of Tuor and Idril, an elf and a man, was a celebrated union. From it was born a child, Eärendil. But for Maeglin, this was the final, unforgivable insult. His secret love and his public ambition had both been thwarted by a mortal upstart. His envy burned like a black coal in his heart, and his resentment for Tuor, and now for Turgon's judgment, grew into a silent, simmering hatred for them all. He bided his time, his loyalty to Gondolin eroding with every passing day. Morgoth now possessed the one thing he had lacked for centuries: a map. But how does one move an army of dragons, balrogs, and countless orcs across guarded lands to a city whose precise location is still a myth to the outside world? Maeglin's restlessness and his lust for rare metals drove him to defy Turgon's strictest law. He began to lead mining expeditions further and further from the city, even venturing beyond the encircling mountains, a capital offense. He grew reckless, and on one such journey, he was ambushed. His companions were slain, but Maeglin, a prince of the Noldor, was captured by orcs and taken alive. He was dragged in chains to the hell pits of Angband and brought before the dark throne of Morgoth himself. Morgoth did not need to torture Maeglin for long. The elf was already broken by his own bitterness. The Dark Lord, a master of minds, saw the festering wounds of envy and ambition in Maeglin's heart, and knew precisely how to exploit them. He did not merely offer Maeglin his life, he offered him his desires. He promised Maeglin the lordship of Gondolin, to be held as Morgoth's vassal, and he promised him Idril. All he had to do was reveal the exact location of the hidden city, the nature of its defenses, and the best time to attack. Maeglin, his spirit consumed by his long-nurtured hatred, gave Morgoth everything. He described the mountain paths, the strength of the seven gates, the size of Turgon's armies, and the layout of the city itself. He betrayed every secret he had ever known. He sealed the pact. The greatest treachery of the First Age was complete. Morgoth, in a cunning display of psychological warfare, then released Maeglin, allowing him to return to Gondolin. He was to act as if he had escaped, a hero returned from the clutches of the enemy, ensuring no one would suspect his treason. A sleeper agent was now inside the last elven citadel. Maeglin returned, and none knew of the darkness he now served. He walked the white streets, feigned loyalty to the king, and watched Tuor and Idril with a new, chilling patience. He was now Morgoth's eyes and ears, waiting for the signal. While Maeglin plotted, Idril's heart was filled with a deep foreboding. She did not trust her cousin, and a shadow of doom seemed to hang over the city, imperceptible to all others. Guided by this premonition, she began a secret work. She commissioned a hidden tunnel, an escape route leading from her own house deep under the city and northwards out of the valley. Only a trusted few knew of its existence. It was a desperate gamble against a threat she could not name. Tuor, too, felt the looming dread. Valor of men is often quicker to action than the long hope of the elves. He urged Turgon to heed Ulmo's warning, to prepare for war, to not trust in stone walls alone. But Turgon, having ruled in peace for so many centuries, had grown proud. He saw his city as the pinnacle of elven achievement, a fortress so perfect it was beyond assault. He dismissed Tuor's fears as the restlessness of a mortal man. The city prepared not for war, but for a festival. The Gates of Summer was the greatest celebration in Gondolin, a time of joy, song, and light. All the people were to gather on the walls at dawn to greet the rising sun. Maeglin saw his chance. He sent word to Morgoth. The attack must come during the festival, when the city's guard would be at its lowest, and its people would be gathered and unprepared. Morgoth's legions moved. Under the cover of storm and shadow, the greatest army ever assembled in the north marched south. There were orcs beyond counting. There were wolves and fell beasts. But this was no mere army of goblins. This was a force of absolute annihilation. Leading the vanguard were the Balrogs, the demons of shadow and flame, their fiery whips cracking in the dark. And with them came the newest and most terrible of Morgoth's creations. Great dragons of bronze and iron, their bellies filled with fire, and upon their backs they bore legions of orcs. They were living siege towers, engines of unstoppable destruction. The festival began under a sky of false peace. But as the sun rose, it was not the light of the Valar that greeted the elves of Gondolin. It was a new dawn, a red dawn, brought by fire and ruin. What hope could a single city have against the full, unleashed wrath of a dark god? The assault was a masterpiece of tactical horror, conceived by Morgoth and guided by Maeglin's intimate knowledge. The main thrust of the attack did not come from the west, where the secret path and the seven gates lay. It came from the north, over the highest and most difficult peaks of the Ecthelion, the very last place Turgon would have expected an assault. It was the city's greatest protection, and so it was the least guarded. The sound that awoke the city was not the celebratory music of harps, but the earth-shattering roar of dragons. The light was not the gentle gold of sunrise, but the hellish red of flame. The armies of Angband poured over the mountains like a river of molten steel, their descent guided by the traitor within. The outer lookouts were slaughtered before they could even sound a proper alarm. By the time the great bells of the city began to ring in panic, the enemy was already at the walls. The northern gate was the first to fall. It was breached not by ram, but by dragonfire, melted into a heap of glowing slag. The first wave of orcs swarmed into the city, a tide of black armor and cruel blades, and the slaughter began in the beautiful northern plazas. The elves, though caught by surprise, were the Noldor. They were warriors of legend, and they sold their lives dearly. The 12 great houses of the city rallied to the defense. From every street and alley, the golden and silver armor of the elven knights appeared, their bright swords meeting the dark tide. King Turgon, shocked from his complacent pride, directed the main defense from his high tower, his commands ringing out across the city. But the scale of the attack was beyond anything he had ever imagined. For every orc that fell, 10 more swarmed over the walls. The dragons were now inside the city proper, their immense bulk demolishing buildings, their fiery breath turning gardens and libraries into ash. And at the heart of the inferno were the Balrogs, lords of terror, each a match for 100 elven warriors. But in all this chaos, where was the architect of this ruin? Where was Maeglin? He was not fighting with the orcs on the main battlements. No. Morgoth's orders for him were far more specific and far more depraved. His price for Gondolin was not merely its ruin, but its future. He was to find Idril and seize her and her young son, Eärendil. For what greater torment could Morgoth devise? What more perverse triumph than to not only destroy the hidden city, but to corrupt its lineage and claim its princess for the cause of darkness? While the greatest heroes of the city, Ecthelion and Glorfindel, fought demons of fire in the King's Square, a more personal and insidious evil slithered towards the house of Idril, unnoticed in the greater doom. But what if the doom was not entirely unnoticed? Idril Celebrimbor, gifted with the foresight of her line, had long felt a cold dread coiling around the city's heart. She had seen the darkness in Maeglin's obsessive gaze, and, trusting her instincts over the king's pride, had commissioned a secret work, a hidden way, a tunnel, leading from her own house, down into the depths of the mountain, and out into the darkness beyond the city's northern precipice. A desperate, final hope. The sound of Maeglin's treachery was the splintering of wood and the clash of steel within her own home. Idril stood before her son, a mother's desperate fury turning her into a shield of flesh and will. But Maeglin's corrupt soldiers pushed her aside, their hands reaching for the boy. But at that moment, a roar of pure rage echoed from the doorway. Tuor had arrived. He was no elf lord in shining mail. He was a storm of vengeance, his great axe Dramberleg a blur of silver light. The traitors fell before him like wheat before a scythe. Maeglin released Idril and drew his blade, a black sword of Angband's forges. The two cousins faced each other on the high balcony, the burning city their witness. It was a duel of bitter hatred, the strength of mortal man against the venomous spite of a fallen elf. Steel rang on steel, a personal battle amidst the city's death throes. With a final, desperate lunge, Maeglin wounded Tuor in the arm, but it was not enough. Tuor, summoning a strength born of love and despair, caught Maeglin by the waist, lifted him high above his head, and with a great cry, hurled him from the walls. The traitor's scream was cut short as his body struck the rock, and then vanished into the inferno below. While this private evil was put to an end, the city's public agony reached its crescendo in the King's Square. There, by the ruined fountain, stood Gothmog, Lord of Balrogs, his fiery whip clearing a circle of death around him. All had fled before him, save one, Ecthelion of the Fountain. His silver armor rent and blackened, his sword arm broken, staggered to his feet. With a final, piercing cry to the heavens, Ecthelion charged. Having no weapon, he used the last one he had, himself. He leaped forward, driving the spike of his helmet deep into the Balrog's chest. Gothmog roared, his own black axe falling upon Ecthelion's back, and together, locked in a mortal embrace, the Lord of the Fountain and the Lord of Flame fell into the basin of the great fountain itself. From his high tower, King Turgon saw it all. He saw Ecthelion fall, saw the dragons tear down his city's gates, saw his people slaughtered in the streets he had built. His dream was dead. Refusing all counsel to flee, he cast off his crown. He would not outlive his kingdom. The great tower of the king, the beacon of the Noldor for 500 years, collapsed into a cataclysm of fire and ruin, taking the last High King of the Noldor in Middle-earth with it. Gondolin was lost. Tuor, gathering Idril and Eärendil, rallied the few survivors. Their only path was Idril's secret way. They fled into the bowels of the earth, the thunder of their city's fall echoing in the dark. They emerged, blinking, onto a high mountain pass, the cold air a shock after the heat of the fires. But their escape had been seen. From a high peak, a Balrog leaped down, blocking their path, its shadow covering the sun. Hope, it seemed, had died with the city. But Gondolin's valor was not yet spent. Glorfindel of the Golden Flower, his hair like a golden banner in the wind, strode forward. "Go!" he commanded Tuor. "This is a foe that I must face alone." Upon that narrow bridge of rock, a duel for the fate of the future was fought. A clash of celestial light against abyssal darkness. Glorfindel fought with the fury of the Eldar, but the demon was a foe of ancient power. As the Balrog lunged, Glorfindel sidestepped and drove his sword deep. The demon cried out, and in its death throes it reached out, its fiery whip ensnaring Glorfindel, dragging him with it into the abyss. The survivors watched in horror and awe. As they wept, Thorondor, king of the eagles, swooped from the heavens, diving into the chasm to bear up the body of the fallen hero, a sign that his sacrifice was not in vain, nor was it an end. And so they passed. The last remnant of Gondolin, the last hidden kingdom of the Noldor, was no more. A great light had been extinguished from the world. But in the arms of his mother, a child named Eärendil, half elven, half man, was carried out of the ruin. He was the son of the fallen city, but he was also the seed of a new hope. A hope that would one day sail the very stars to plead for the salvation of the world. The greatest of tragedies gave birth to the greatest of legends. Gondolin is gone, but its legacy is eternal. To witness the birth of that legacy, and to see how the hope of Eärendil changes the fate of Middle-earth forever, subscribe to the Silmarillion Chronicles. The Age of Elves is ending. The Age of Hope is about